In the hidden corners of American folklore and cryptid lore, few creatures inspire as much dread and curiosity as the Dogman. Unlike the better-known Bigfoot, which is often described as shy and elusive, the Dogman carries with it an aura of aggression and menace that makes eyewitness accounts deeply unsettling. The stories of Dogman attacks span decades, and while skeptics dismiss them as hallucinations, misidentifications, or outright fabrications, there remain chilling reports that refuse to be neatly explained away. These accounts, passed down through witness testimonies, police reports, and local legends, have become part of a disturbing catalog of encounters that seem far too real for those who lived through them. Among these accounts, 10 stand out as some of the most terrifying and memorable cases where people claim to have come face to face with this nightmarish creature. One of the earliest recorded modern Dogman encounters comes from the mid-20th century in Michigan, a state forever tied to Dogman legends. A group of loggers working deep in the woods reported a bizarre and terrifying incident in which their camp was circled at night by what they initially thought was a large wolf. But as the creature drew closer, standing unnaturally on two legs and staring at them with glowing amber eyes, the men realized they were facing something outside the natural order. It snarled, its breath steaming in the cold air, before lunging at their food supplies and clawing at the wooden storage crates with frightening force. The loggers managed to chase it away with gunfire, but the claw marks left behind were unlike any wolf or bear they had ever seen. That night none of them slept, and by morning half the group refused to continue the job, abandoning their equipment rather than risk another night with the beast lurking in the shadows. Another deeply chilling account comes from a family in Wisconsin in the 1970s. Driving late at night down a rural highway, the family's car headlights illuminated a massive figure crossing the road. At first they thought it was a bear, but the creature turned its head, revealing a long snout and wolf-like face, before standing up straight on its hind legs. The father slammed on the brakes, and the family watched in frozen terror as the Dogman slowly approached the car, placing one clawed hand on the hood. It growled low, denting the metal with its strength before stepping back and vanishing into the tree line. For weeks afterward, the children had nightmares, and when the father took the car to be repaired, the mechanic reportedly asked what had left such massive claw indentations. The family never drove that stretch of road again after dark. One of the most terrifying alleged Dogman attacks occurred in Kentucky in the 1980s, when a group of teenagers went camping near a remote river. According to their account, they were sitting around a fire telling ghost stories when they began hearing heavy footsteps in the brush. At first they assumed it was a prank by other campers, but the sound grew louder and closer, accompanied by a guttural growl. Suddenly, a hulking creature burst from the trees, its form illuminated by the campfire. A wolf-headed beast with shaggy fur, standing taller than any man. Panic erupted as the teens scrambled for their tents and vehicles. The Dogman slashed at one of the tents, ripping it to shreds in seconds, before chasing them down the trail. One boy tripped and fell, swearing later that the creature's claws grazed his leg before his friends pulled him up and dragged him into a car. Tires spun in the mud as they escaped, leaving behind everything they had brought. The sheriff's office investigated the abandoned site the next morning and confirmed the tents were shredded and deep claw marks gouged the trees, but no explanation was given publicly. In rural Texas, a farmer reported a disturbing encounter that he swore nearly cost him his life. He had been dealing with livestock mutilations on his property and assumed coyotes or wild dogs were responsible. One evening, armed with a rifle, he set out to catch the culprit. What he found was far worse than he imagined. As he staked out near his barn, he heard scratching sounds, then a horrific cry from one of his goats. Running to the pen, he froze at the sight of a massive Dogman hunched over the carcass. It turned to face him, its muzzle dripping with blood, and with terrifying speed, it charged. The farmer fired several shots, swearing he hit the creature, but it didn't slow down. At the last moment he ducked behind a gate, and the beast slammed into it with bone-shaking force before retreating into the fields. For weeks afterward, he found huge tracks around his property, as if the Dogman was watching him, waiting for another opportunity. Another chilling case comes from Maine in the early 1990s, when two hunters claimed they were ambushed by a Dogman while tracking deer. They had split up to cover more ground, and one of them reported hearing his partner scream in the distance. When he ran to investigate, he found his friend on the ground, bleeding from long gashes across his back, while a towering wolf-like creature stood over him. He raised his rifle and fired, hitting the creature in the shoulder. It howled in pain, but instead of fleeing, it turned on him, charging at full speed. He barely managed to fire again, and only then did the Dogman retreat into the woods, leaving both men shaken and injured. The wounded hunter required stitches, and though they reported the attack as a bear mauling, both later admitted privately they knew what they saw was no bear. A notorious story from Ohio in the late 1990s details how a group of friends driving along a desolate country road encountered a Dogman that chased their car. They noticed glowing eyes in the ditch and slowed down, only for the creature to leap onto the road behind them. As they accelerated, the beast kept pace, running on two legs at incredible speed. It slammed its clawed hands against the back window, cracking the glass before eventually dropping back. When they reached town, the back of the car was covered in deep gouges. The sheriff dismissed it as vandalism, but the friends knew the truth. They had been hunted by something beyond explanation. In the Appalachian Mountains, hikers have long reported strange howls and growls, but one account from West Virginia stands out. A lone hiker claimed he was stalked for hours by a Dogman that shadowed him along the trail. As night fell, he set up camp, but the creature grew bolder, circling the site and letting out bone-chilling howls. Around midnight, it attacked, tearing at his tent and forcing him to flee barefoot into the woods. He managed to climb a rock ledge where the Dogman could not reach him, spending the entire night trembling and listening to the beast pacing below. At dawn, it finally disappeared, but the hiker was left traumatized, vowing never to return to the mountains. In Canada, reports of Dogman encounters have also surfaced, particularly in remote Ontario. A truck driver making a delivery late at night swore he hit something massive on the road. When he got out to check, he found a hulking Dogman writhing in the headlights. It suddenly leapt up, snarling, and began slamming its fists against the cab of the truck. Terrified, the driver sped away, but claw marks were later found scratched deep into the steel. He refused to drive that route again and eventually quit trucking altogether. One of the most recent and terrifying encounters allegedly took place in rural Alabama, where a family claimed their home was besieged by a Dogman for 3 nights. It began with strange howls in the distance, then escalated to the creature scratching at doors and windows. On the 3rd night, the father fired a shotgun through the window as the Dogman tried to break in, but instead of dying, the beast let out a deafening roar and fled. The family abandoned the house, never to return, and locals whisper that the property remains haunted by the presence of something unnatural. Finally, one of the most mysterious cases occurred in Michigan once again, where 2 police officers responding to a disturbance call claimed they were attacked by a Dogman. They had been dispatched to investigate reports of livestock deaths and prowlers. As they searched the area, their patrol car was rocked violently. Stepping out, they were confronted by a massive, fur-covered beast that towered over them. One officer fired his weapon while the other called for backup. The creature fled, but the car was left with claw marks and the officers were shaken beyond belief. Their official report filed it as animal activity, but both men privately admitted they believed it was no ordinary animal. These 10 accounts, while impossible to fully verify, form a chilling pattern that has haunted North American folklore for generations. The Dogman seems to emerge from the shadows of the wilderness, leaving behind claw marks, shredded campsites, traumatized witnesses, and in some cases, injured victims. While skeptics dismiss these tales as exaggerations or hoaxes, the sheer consistency of details across decades and states raises disturbing questions. Could there truly be a predator lurking just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting, and sometimes striking with terrifying ferocity? Or is the Dogman nothing more than a shared nightmare, a folkloric echo of ancient fears that manifest in the dark? Whatever the truth, the legends of Dogman attacks remain among the most terrifying cryptid stories ever told, and for those who claim to have seen it with their own eyes, the creature is horrifyingly real. Even as modern technology allows us to capture more and more of the natural world, photographs and video evidence of Dogman remain frustratingly inconclusive. Blurry images, shaky footage, and distorted audio recordings fuel both believers and skeptics. But perhaps that is what makes the Dogman legend endure: its ability to remain hidden, to strike without warning, and to vanish before proof can be secured. For the witnesses, however, no proof is needed. The claw marks, the shattered nerves, the sleepless nights, and the lingering trauma are evidence enough. The Dogman, they say, is real, and those who encounter it are forever changed by the experience. The legend of the Dogman is deeply rooted in North American folklore, particularly in the upper Midwest, where tales of a wolf-like creature walking on two legs have circulated for centuries. The earliest mentions can be traced back to Native American oral traditions, where beings resembling spirit wolves were said to guard the wilderness. These stories blended with European werewolf myths brought by settlers, creating the foundation of what would later be known as the Dogman. Unlike the elusive Bigfoot, the Dogman was described as aggressive, territorial, and sometimes violent toward humans. In modern times, sightings surged in the 20th century, especially after the infamous 1987 Michigan radio broadcast that popularized the term, Dogman. Despite skepticism, consistent eyewitness descriptions across states, from glowing eyes to its uncanny bipedal stride, have kept the legend alive, making it one of the most terrifying and persistent cryptid mysteries in American lore. One of the most unsettling early incidents tied to the Dogman occurred in a remote Michigan logging camp during the mid-20th century. Loggers stationed deep in the forest began noticing strange tracks around their worksite, prints too large for any wolf and oddly shaped as though the creature alternated between walking on four legs and two. At night, eerie howls echoed through the trees, keeping the men on edge. One evening, the camp was surrounded by a hulking creature with glowing amber eyes. It lunged at their food storage, tearing at wooden crates with frightening strength. Gunfire scared it off, but not before it left claw marks on timber far deeper than any bear could manage. The shaken loggers abandoned camp soon after, refusing to work in the area again. Their testimonies, preserved in local lore, remain one of the earliest modern records of a Dogman attack, blending physical evidence with bone-chilling eyewitness fear. In the 1970s, a Wisconsin family encountered the Dogman in an incident that left physical evidence and lasting trauma. Driving along a rural highway late at night, their headlights revealed a massive figure crossing the road. Initially thought to be a bear, the creature suddenly rose onto its hind legs, revealing a wolf-like head and glowing eyes. The father slammed the brakes, but the Dogman continued toward the car, placing one clawed hand firmly on the hood. Its growl was so deep that the children inside began to cry. The weight of the hand left a dent in the metal before the beast retreated into the forest. When the family brought the car for repairs, mechanics remarked on the unusual claw-shaped impressions. The family avoided that stretch of road thereafter, and their story spread locally as one of the most frightening Dogman encounters to leave undeniable physical marks behind. A particularly violent account took place in Kentucky during the 1980s when a group of teenagers decided to camp along a secluded river. The night began with laughter and ghost stories around the fire, but soon strange noises in the woods silenced the group. Heavy footsteps circled their sight, followed by deep growls that vibrated in their chests. Before they could react, a massive wolf-headed creature burst through the tree line, illuminated by the flames. It ripped through a tent with its claws, sending fabric flying as the teenagers screamed in terror. One boy stumbled, later claiming the beast's claws grazed his leg, leaving bleeding scratches. In sheer panic, the group piled into their car, narrowly escaping as the Dogman pursued them down the dirt trail. Authorities who later investigated found shredded tents and claw marks etched into surrounding trees, confirming something powerful had indeed torn through the campsite that night. In rural Texas, livestock mutilations set the stage for a terrifying Dogman encounter in the 1990s. A farmer had been losing goats and chickens in gruesome ways, throats torn out, bodies left half-eaten. Assuming coyotes were to blame, he set up a nighttime watch near his barn with a rifle in hand. What he discovered was far more horrifying. Emerging from the shadows was a towering, wolf-like figure hunched over one of his goats, its muzzle stained red. When the farmer raised his weapon, the creature locked eyes with him and charged at astonishing speed. He fired multiple shots, swearing he struck the beast, but it didn't stop. At the last second, he ducked behind a metal gate as the Dogman slammed into it, rattling the structure violently. Eventually, it retreated, but for weeks afterward, the farmer found enormous prints near his property. He abandoned livestock farming altogether, unwilling to face the Dogman again. Hunters in Maine reported an equally disturbing experience in the early 1990s. Two men tracking deer in dense woods separated briefly to cover more ground. Moments later, one of them heard a blood-curdling scream from his partner. Racing toward the sound, he found his friend collapsed, bleeding from long gashes across his back. Looming above him was a wolf-headed creature standing on two legs. In shock, he raised his rifle and fired, striking the beast in the shoulder. The dogman let out a deafening roar, but instead of fleeing immediately, it turned its attention on the shooter, charging with frightening speed. Only a second shot, delivered in panic, caused it to retreat into the trees. The injured hunter required stitches, and though they reported the incident officially as a bear mauling, both privately confessed the truth. What they saw was no bear, but a predator unlike anything recognized by science. In Ohio during the late 1990s, a group of friends driving a backroad encountered a dogman in one of the most harrowing vehicular chase accounts ever told. They first noticed a pair of glowing eyes in the ditch and slowed down, curious. Without warning, a towering wolf-like creature leapt onto the road and began pursuing the car. Despite accelerating, the dogman kept pace, running upright at an impossible speed. It slammed its clawed hands against the trunk, leaving gouges in the paint, and even cracked the rear windshield with the force of its strikes. Screaming, the friends pressed the accelerator to the floor until the beast finally vanished into the darkness. Upon inspection, their car bore deep scratches and shattered glass. When reported, authorities dismissed it as vandalism, but the group insisted they were hunted that night by a predator from legend, not any human hand capable of such destruction. West Virginia has long been a hotbed of strange cryptid activity, and one hiker's story adds fuel to the dogman legend. Hiking alone in the Appalachian Mountains, he began to feel watched as dusk settled. Heavy footfalls echoed parallel to the trail, keeping pace with his every move. When he stopped, the sounds stopped. By nightfall, he set up camp, but the uneasy sensation grew into outright fear when low growls surrounded his tent. Suddenly, the dogman attacked, slashing at the fabric and forcing him to flee barefoot into the wilderness. Desperate for safety, he scrambled onto a rocky ledge where the beast circled below, snarling and pacing. All through the night, he clung to the rocks, shivering in fear, until the first rays of dawn made the creature retreat. He survived physically unharmed, but the psychological scars left behind were so deep he swore never to hike alone again. North of the border, Canada also has its share of dogman encounters, with one of the most frightening involving a truck driver in Ontario. Late one night, he swerved to avoid hitting what he assumed was a deer but instead struck a massive shape on the road. When he stepped out to check, he found himself face to face with a dogman illuminated in his headlights. Snarling, the creature rose to its full height and began pounding its fists on the cab of the truck. Terrified, the driver scrambled back inside and sped away as claws screeched across the metal. When he finally reached a rest stop, he discovered deep scratches gouged into the steel doors. Shaken beyond belief, he quit long-haul trucking within months, unwilling to risk another encounter. His story circulated among fellow drivers, serving as a grim reminder of what might lurk along Canada's endless, forest-lined highways after dark. Perhaps one of the most chilling modern cases took place in Alabama, where a family reported that their rural home was terrorized by a dogman over the course of 3 consecutive nights. It began with howls echoing through the woods, escalating each evening until the creature began scratching at windows and pounding on the doors. On the final night, it attempted to break through the back door, forcing the father to fire a shotgun blast through the window. Instead of collapsing, the dogman let out an ear-splitting roar and fled into the trees. The family abandoned their home that very night, never to return. Neighbors later confirmed they too had heard the howls and witnessed claw marks on the property. The tale has since become part of local legend, with many in the area believing the land itself is cursed, forever stalked by something monstrous that refuses to be forgotten. Michigan, the birthplace of modern dogman lore, was the setting for one of the most startling official encounters. 2 police officers responded to a call about livestock mutilations and prowlers in a rural area. While patrolling, their cruiser suddenly shook violently as something massive collided with it. Exiting cautiously, they were confronted by a fur-covered beast standing upright. One officer opened fire while the other radioed for backup. The dogman snarled before retreating into the woods, leaving behind claw marks gouged into the vehicle. Their official report listed it as animal activity, but privately both officers admitted they had never seen anything resembling the creature. Fear of ridicule kept their testimonies quiet for years, yet word eventually spread through local law enforcement circles. This encounter remains one of the few alleged Dogman cases involving sworn officers, lending chilling weight to the possibility that something truly unnatural prowls the Michigan wilderness. Across all these encounters, a remarkable consistency emerges in the descriptions of the Dogman. Witnesses, separated by geography and decades, describe a hulking figure between 6 and 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with a wolf-like head, pointed ears, and glowing eyes that reflect light eerily in the dark. Most accounts emphasize its ability to walk, and even sprint, on 2 legs, though some suggest it alternates between quadrupedal and bipedal movement. The creature is often described as heavily muscled, exuding raw power, with clawed hands capable of tearing through metal, wood, and flesh alike. Unlike Bigfoot, which is often portrayed as reclusive or even gentle, the Dogman is remembered as overtly hostile, sometimes stalking or attacking those who cross its path. The near-identical details from unrelated eyewitnesses strengthen the case that something real underlies the legend, or at the very least, that a shared archetype of terror grips those who claim to see it. For many witnesses, the terror of encountering a Dogman doesn't end when the creature disappears into the night. The psychological aftermath can be as damaging as the encounter itself. Survivors report intense nightmares, insomnia, and paranoia that linger for years. Some develop a fear of forests, refusing ever to camp or hike again. Others move away from rural areas entirely, desperate to escape the possibility of another sighting. In more extreme cases, witnesses report symptoms resembling post-traumatic stress disorder, flashes of the creature's glowing eyes, phantom growls in the dark, and panic attacks triggered by the sound of scratching or howling. These long-term effects suggest that, whether real or imagined, the Dogman encounters leave deep scars on the human psyche. For skeptics, this serves as proof of mass hysteria or psychological projection. For believers, it demonstrates the terrifying reality of coming face to face with a predator beyond human understanding. Law enforcement's response to Dogman reports has historically been one of dismissal and understatement, often leaving witnesses frustrated and silenced. When people report livestock mutilations, shredded tents, or even physical injuries, police frequently attribute them to bear attacks, wolf predation, or simple vandalism. In some rare cases where officers themselves are witnesses, official reports are often altered or downplayed to avoid public panic. This reluctance to acknowledge the possibility of an unknown predator leads many to believe there is a deliberate effort to cover up Dogman encounters. Others argue that authorities themselves are skeptical and see no benefit in pursuing what they consider wild stories. Yet, the fact that some officers privately admit to seeing things they cannot explain suggests there may be more to the phenomenon than standard procedure allows them to admit. This lack of official recognition only deepens the mystery surrounding the Dogman. Skeptics argue that Dogman sightings can be explained through more rational means. Many claim witnesses simply misidentified wolves, bears, or even large dogs standing upright momentarily. Others insist that alcohol, fatigue, or fear-induced hallucinations can account for the terrifying details. Hoaxes also play a role, with pranksters donning costumes or fabricating claw marks to perpetuate the legend. To scientists, the lack of physical evidence, bones, bodies, or clear photographs, proves that Dogman belongs in the realm of myth rather than biology. However, skeptics struggle to explain the widespread consistency of descriptions across decades and regions, or why so many seemingly reliable individuals, including police officers, hunters, and truck drivers, would risk ridicule by sharing such encounters. For believers, the sheer number of independent reports defies coincidence, and skepticism only adds another layer of tension to the already chilling question. If not misidentification or hoax, then what exactly is the Dogman? Beyond natural explanations, some theorists propose paranormal origins for the Dogman. Folklore often ties the creature to shapeshifters or skinwalkers, humans cursed or gifted with the ability to transform into beasts. Others suggest the Dogman is a type of werewolf, perhaps linked to occult practices or ancient curses. More fringe theories describe it as an interdimensional entity, slipping into our world through thin places in reality, which would explain its elusiveness and ability to appear and vanish without trace. Some paranormal investigators believe Dogman encounters often occur near sites of spiritual significance, burial grounds, or areas with histories of supernatural activity. While impossible to prove, these theories add a chilling dimension to the legend, suggesting the Dogman is not simply a cryptid but a supernatural predator that exists on the edges of human perception, feeding not only on livestock and fear, but also on the mystery that keeps its legend alive. Unlike the Bigfoot, which is generally described as elusive, shy, and even peaceful, the Dogman is consistently remembered as aggressive and terrifying. Bigfoot encounters often involve distant glimpses or harmless curiosity, while Dogman stories describe stalking, attacks, and property destruction. Witnesses report the Dogman charging vehicles, clawing through tents, and attempting to break into homes, behaviors far beyond what is attributed to Bigfoot. This aggressive reputation has given Dogman a far darker place in folklore, often associated with violence, fear, and death. Some researchers speculate that the Dogman is territorial, attacking those who encroach upon its hunting grounds. Others suggest it feeds on fear itself, manifesting in ways designed to terrify. Whatever the case, this stark difference in demeanor has made Dogman encounters far more chilling, cementing its place as one of the most terrifying cryptids in the world of unexplained phenomena. Patterns in Dogman sightings suggest the creature thrives in specific environments. Reports cluster around rural areas with thick forests, isolated farms, and backcountry roads far from urban centers. Encounters often occur near livestock, with mutilations being a recurring theme, suggesting a predatory relationship. Campgrounds, hiking trails, and logging sites also appear frequently in accounts, perhaps because these places bring humans directly into the Dogman's territory. Witnesses often describe encounters at night, with the creature taking advantage of darkness to stalk its prey. Interestingly, many sightings occur near bodies of water, rivers, lakes, or swamps, leading some to theorize that Dogmen rely on waterways as hunting corridors. The repeated appearance of these patterns across states and decades adds credibility to reports, suggesting that if the Dogman exists, it follows consistent habits, much like any apex predator that has adapted to survive unseen in the wilderness. One of the greatest frustrations for researchers and believers is the lack of conclusive photographic or video evidence of the Dogman. Eyewitnesses frequently describe glowing eyes, hulking shadows, and blurs of movement, but when cameras are involved, the results are almost always shaky, grainy, or inconclusive. Skeptics use this to dismiss the creature's existence, while believers argue that encounters are so sudden and terrifying that capturing a clear image is nearly impossible. Some even suggest the Dogman possesses an ability to distort technology or emit electromagnetic interference, explaining why photos and videos turn out distorted. The few existing recordings of supposed howls and growls are chilling but not definitive, often resembling wolves or bears. This lack of hard evidence continues to fuel both sides of the debate. Skeptics demand proof, while believers argue that the testimony of terrified witnesses should not be so easily disregarded in the absence of it. Despite the lack of proof, the legend of the Dogman endures, fueled by fear and fascination alike. Stories of encounters continue to surface, passed through campfire tales, radio shows, and online forums. The idea of a predator that stands on the edge of humanity's understanding speaks to primal fears buried deep within the human psyche. People may fear wolves, bears, or wild animals, but the Dogman represents something even worse. An intelligent predator with both human and beastly traits, capable of stalking us in places we consider safe. This enduring terror has ensured the Dogman's place in folklore alongside vampires, werewolves, and demons. Whether it is a cryptid, a paranormal entity, or a figment of collective imagination, the Dogman remains one of the most terrifying mysteries of modern folklore. For those who have faced it, no debate is necessary. The nightmare is frighteningly, undeniably real.